What if I told you that sometimes the richest person in the room is actually the poorest? It's a strange thought, isn't it? We're raised to believe that power and wealth are the ultimate measures of a person's worth. But the truth is, a person can have $1 billion in the bank and still be completely bankrupt in spirit. This story is a powerful testament to that very idea, proving that a person's true value is revealed not when they have everything, but when they have nothing. It all began when a powerful CEO's credit cards were declined and, in his moment of ultimate humiliation, a simple waitress offered him a meal, unknowingly beginning his journey to change everything. This is the emotional story of Albert Dunn, a ruthless CEO living in a gilded cage of his own making. A man so cynical he trusted no one and believed kindness was just a transaction. And it's the story of Sharon West, a struggling waitress working double shifts to support her family, a woman who had almost nothing to give but gave it anyway. Their two worlds, separated by a vast ocean of wealth and status, were never meant to collide. But destiny, as it often does, had a stunning plot twist in store for both of them, sparked by a single selfless act. We've all felt overlooked or misjudged at some point, haven't we? We've all wondered if there's still genuine goodness left in the world. This heart-aching story dives right into that feeling, exploring what happens when extreme cynicism is met with radical kindness. It's a narrative that promises not just drama and surprise, but also a powerful sense of happy belief that no one is beyond redemption and that a simple act of compassion can be the catalyst for the most profound transformation. So get ready for an unforgettable journey of secrets, lies, and the surprising path to earning a second chance. This isn't just a love story, it's a story about the rediscovery of the human soul. This incredible story has reached you today, and we're so curious to see how far this message has traveled. Please let us know what beautiful city you're watching from in the comments below so we can imagine the view with you. And if you believe in the power of kindness to change the world, do us a huge favor, hit that like button, subscribe to our channel so you don't miss what's next, and share this video with one person you know who has a beautiful heart. The city lights sparkled below, mirroring the cold glitter in Albert Dunn's eyes as he sat alone. He was a man accustomed to the world bending to his will, a CEO whose name was a synonym for power. Dinner was a mere transaction, another display of his untouchable status in a world that ran on numbers. He barely glanced at the menu he didn't need to. He owned the restaurant, after all, a small fact he kept as a private secret. Tonight was no different from any other, or so he thought. But then came the bill, a trivial matter that would soon escalate into a full-blown test of his composure. He slid a black, limitless card across the table without a second thought, expecting the usual swift and deferential service. The young waitress, whose name tag read Sharon, returned a moment later, her expression unreadable. "I'm so sorry, sir," she began, her voice soft but clear, "but this card has been declined." The word hung in the air, alien and offensive to his ears. A flicker of annoyance crossed Albert's face. Impossible. He produced another card, then another, each one a symbol of his immense wealth. Each time, Sharon West returned with the same quiet apology. This one was also declined. The whispers from nearby tables began to prickle his skin. The great Albert Dunn, humiliated by a simple machine. He felt a flush of heat rise to his cheeks, a feeling he hadn't experienced since he was a boy with empty pockets and big dreams. From behind her tired eyes, Sharon didn't see a CEO, just a man cornered by embarrassment. She knew that look all too well, the quiet panic of being caught short. Her world was a universe away from his, built on double shifts and scrapatogether tips, not corporate takeovers. Yet, in that moment, she felt a surprising pang of empathy. This wasn't about his status, it was about a shared, albeit momentary, human vulnerability that sparked her innate kindness. So she did something utterly illogical, something that went against every rule of her own precarious financial survival. "Don't you worry about it," she said with a gentle smile, tucking the bill into her apron pocket. "It's on me tonight. Just pay it forward sometime." The surprise on his face was palpable, a crack in his carefully constructed armor. A simple waitress had just offered him a lifeline, an act of pure, uncalculated kindness he couldn't possibly comprehend. Albert sat there, stunned into silence, as she walked away. This woman, this stranger, had just saved him from further humiliation without asking for a thing in return. It was an emotional plot twist in the predictable narrative of his life. He couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just a coincidence. It felt like a ripple in the fabric of his destiny. He was left with a burning question: why would she do that? What was her secret? Long after the wealthy CEO had gone, the reality of Sharon West's life settled back in. The clatter of dishes and the murmur of late-night customers were the soundtrack to her exhaustion. For her, the diner wasn't a place of power plays or dramatic moments. It was a battleground for survival. Each cleared table and each meager tip was a small victory in a war against mounting bills. That single act of kindness toward a stranger was a luxury she couldn't really afford, but her heart simply wouldn't have it any other way. She'd hang up her waitress apron near midnight, but her day was far from over. Her second job as a cleaner in a quiet office building awaited her. This grueling routine was her life, a relentless cycle of work and weariness, all to support her ailing mother and younger brother. Her family was her secret motivation, the reason she pushed through the pain in her feet and the ache in her soul. They were the silent witnesses to her daily sacrifices, a burden she carried with a quiet, unshakable grace. Life for Sharon was a continuous, demanding test of her spirit and resilience. She faced her own version of a decline notice every month when rent was due, a constant reminder of how close to the edge she lived. There were no safety nets, no trust funds, just the sheer force of her will against a world that rarely offered a helping hand. Yet, she never allowed the bitterness of her circumstances to tarnish her innate goodness, a quality that shone brighter than any tycoon's fortune. Tucked away in a small, worn-out notebook was the evidence of her one true dream, a heart-aching collection of recipes and sketches. This was her secret escape, the dream of Sharon Sweets, a small bakery that would smell of cinnamon and hope. She imagined a place where people wouldn't just buy pastries, but would find a moment of comfort and warmth. It was a simple, beautiful dream, a stark contrast to the harshness of her daily life and the world of men like Albert Dunn. This dream wasn't about escaping her life, but about transforming it into something beautiful. It was a different kind of love story she was writing for herself, one filled with the passion for creating joy for others. Every perfect swirl of frosting she imagined and every new recipe she perfected in her mind was a step toward that destiny. She believed that kindness could be baked into bread and that a simple cookie could offer a moment of redemption to a weary soul, a surprise bit of sweetness in a bitter world. As she finally walked home under the pale glow of the streetlights, the memory of the humiliated man in the expensive suit briefly crossed her mind. It was just a strange blip, an emotional little plot twist in an otherwise predictable day. She shrugged it off, completely unaware that her small gesture had planted a seed in the most unlikely of gardens. She had her own problems to worry about, never suspecting that the powerful CEO was now utterly consumed by her simple, baffling act. Back in his sterile penthouse, surrounded by glass and steel, Albert Dunn couldn't shake the image of the waitress. In his world, nothing was free. Every favor was a transaction, every smile a negotiation. He had built an empire on the cold, hard assumption that everyone had an angle, a price. This jaded perspective was his shield, the armor that protected the CEO from the vipers in his own boardroom. Her kindness, therefore, couldn't be just kindness. It had to be a setup, a trick. He replayed the scene in his mind, the declined cards, the creeping sense of being humiliated, and then her simple, disarming offer. It was too pure, too clean. Was she a journalist digging for a story? An aspiring actress hoping to be discovered? Or maybe, just maybe, She recognized him and saw an opportunity for a much larger payout down the line. This heart-aching gesture felt like the opening move in a game he didn't yet understand, a clever test of his own perception. His life had been a series of deceptions, a landscape where trust was a fool's currency. He thought of the countless people who fawned over him daily, their loyalty as thin as the paper their contracts were written on. Sharon West's simple act of generosity was a plot twist that his cynical mind refused to accept at face value. A secret agenda had to be lurking beneath the surface. There was no other logical explanation for a struggling waitress to pay for a stranger's expensive meal. This gnawing suspicion began to consume him. It was a puzzle he felt compelled to solve, a loose thread in the tightly woven fabric of his controlled universe. The surprise of her action had left him feeling strangely vulnerable, a sensation he despised. He decided he couldn't let it go. He needed to understand the truth behind her motives, to expose the inevitable catch he was sure existed. The mystery of the kind waitress became his new obsession, an emotional fixation he couldn't ignore. He believed that her generosity was a carefully crafted performance, and he was determined to see behind the curtain. Albert Dunn hadn't become a billionaire CEO by being naive. He had done it by understanding the intricate and often dark dance of human motivation. He felt a strange pull, a need to prove his cynical worldview right, to confirm that her kindness was just another commodity for sale. Her simple gesture had inadvertently become a challenge. And so, a plan began to form in his brilliant, untrusting mind. He wouldn't confront her directly, that would be too obvious and would give her the upper hand. No, to uncover her secret, he would have to change the rules of the game entirely. He needed to get close, to observe her in her natural habitat, to see the real person behind the waitress uniform. This called for a strategy no one would ever see coming. He would go undercover. A few days later, a man named Al walked into the diner. He was a world away from the powerful CEO who had been there before. Gone was the $1,000 suit, replaced by worn jeans and a faded flannel shirt. Albert Dunn had shed his skin, adopting a disguise of humility that felt both foreign and strangely liberating. He asked for the manager, his voice carefully stripped of its usual command, and said he was looking for any work he could get. This was the first step in his undercover mission. The manager, a greasy man with a perpetually sour expression, barely looked up. He needed a dishwasher, and this guy looked desperate enough not to complain about the low pay. He hired Al on the spot, pointing toward the back. Albert felt a grim satisfaction. The ease with which he infiltrated her world only confirmed his belief that people only see what they want to see. His elaborate test had officially begun, and he was now a fly on the wall, perfectly positioned to watch the unsuspecting waitress. Stepping into the steamy, chaotic world of the kitchen was a shock to his system. The clatter of plates and the shouting of orders were a far cry from the hushed reverence of his boardroom. For the first time in decades, Albert Dunn was at the bottom of the food chain, invisible and insignificant. This jarring new reality was a necessary part of his plan, a way to ensure he could observe Sharon West without the distorting filter of his wealth, to finally uncover her secret. He felt a strange mix of excitement and trepidation. He was voluntarily subjecting himself to a life he had fought so hard to escape, all to satisfy his suspicion about one woman's act of kindness. It was, by all accounts, an insane and emotional decision, but the mystery of Sharon was a siren's call he could not resist. He was convinced that behind her warm smile was a calculating mind, and he was now in the perfect position to witness the moment her mask slipped and her true intentions were revealed. His first glimpse of her from his new station was different. She wasn't the enigmatic savior from the other night, but a tired waitress, expertly navigating the lunchtime rush. He watched her every move, analyzing her interactions, searching for any sign of the duplicity he was so sure he would find. He was the CEO playing a dishwasher, a bizarre plot twist in his own life, all for the sake of confirming that a heartaching gesture was nothing more than a clever lie. As the day wore on, he scrubbed pots and pans, his hands raw and his back aching. He was no longer Albert Dunn, the titan of industry. He was just Al, the new dishwasher. The humiliation of his new role was a small price to pay for the truth he sought. He watched Sharon from across the chaos of the kitchen, ready to dissect her every word and action, completely unprepared for what his undercover investigation would truly reveal about her and about himself. Al was clumsy and slow, a fish out of water in the fast-paced kitchen environment. He nearly dropped a stack of clean plates, earning a sharp rebuke from the manager. Just as the weight of his charade and the unfamiliar shame began to press down on him, a kind voice cut through the noise. "Hey, you'll get the hang of it," Sharon said, offering him a warm, genuine smile. "Let me show you a little trick to stack those faster." She had no idea who he was. She took him under her wing without a second thought, treating the new dishwasher with the same compassion she showed everyone. During a brief lull, she slipped him a sandwich. "You look like you haven't eaten all day," she whispered, a gesture of simple, unprompted kindness. Albert, the CEO who feasted on Michelin-star meals, was momentarily stunned by the heartaching offering. This was his first piece of evidence, and it pointed in a direction he hadn't anticipated. He watched, perplexed, as she shared a portion of her tips with the busboy whose mother was sick. It wasn't for show, no one, but Al was close enough to see the quiet exchange. Albert's internal test was already becoming complicated. He was there to find a secret manipulator, a grifter playing a long game. Instead, he was finding a woman whose generosity seemed to be her very nature. This undercover mission was turning into an emotional minefield, challenging his deepest held beliefs. Every day, Sharon would greet him with that same smile, offering a word of encouragement or a helping hand. She complained about her sore feet, but never about her lot in life. Albert, the man who suspected her of orchestrating a grand deception, found himself on the receiving end of her effortless grace. He was the one with the secret, living a lie, while she was an open book of decency. The surprise wasn't that she had an angle. The surprise was that she didn't seem to have one at all. This was a plot twist more intricate than any corporate takeover he had ever engineered. He, the powerful CEO, was being shown the ropes by the very waitress he was investigating. Her kindness was relentless, a gentle tide wearing away at the rocky shores of his cynicism. He kept telling himself it was all part of her act, a performance for the new guy, but the explanation was beginning to feel thin and desperate, a flimsy shield against an uncomfortable truth. He was caught in a strange limbo. Part of him, the ruthless CEO, was still searching for the lie, the flaw in her character. But another part, the man known as Al, was starting to feel a flicker of something else, a gratitude. He was a spy in the house of kindness, and the evidence he was gathering wasn't building a case against her, but against his own jaded heart. The question was no longer what is her secret, but can anyone really be this good? The defining moment, the piece of evidence Albert couldn't dispute, came on a Tuesday. A businessman, loud and obnoxious, accidentally left his wallet on the table after berating Sharon over the speed of his service. Albert watched from the kitchen, expecting her to pocket some of the cash in Sadia finder's fee for the abuse Shed endured. It's what anyone in his world would have done, a small act of personal justice. He held his breath, seeing this as the ultimate test of her character. Instead, Sharon picked up the wallet, her face etched with concern. Without a moment's hesitation, she ran out of the diner, calling after the man who had been so rude to her just minutes before. Albert saw the exchange through the front window. She handed it back, refused the small reward he offered, and returned to her station with a simple shrug. She hadn't done it for an audience, she had done it because it was the right thing to do. The CEO in him was staggered. The man, Al, was deeply moved. Day after day, his undercover investigation revealed more of the same. He saw her absorb the anger of frustrated customers with a patient nod, never losing her composure. He saw her comfort a fellow waitress who was having a bad day, offering a shoulder to cry on in the cramped break room. Her kindness wasn't a performance, it was her default setting. The woman he was investigating for a secret flaw was proving to be one of the most principled people he had ever met. The word integrity took on a new meaning for Albert. He had always associated it with cutthroat business deals and ironclad contracts. He had never seen it in this form, quiet, steadfast, and utterly unglamorous. Sharon West's entire life was a testament to a kind of wealth he had never bothered to accumulate. This emotional realization was a slow-burning fire in his gut, incinerating years of carefully constructed cynicism about the human condition. This heart-aching display of character was the ultimate plot twist. He had come to the diner seeking confirmation of his dark worldview, to prove that kindness was a myth. Instead, Sharon was holding up a mirror to him, and the reflection he saw was not flattering. He was the one with the secret, the one playing a deceptive game. Her authenticity made his undercover mission feel cheap and deeply shameful. The hunter was becoming captured by the quiet dignity of his prey. His meticulously designed test was backfiring in the most spectacular way. He was supposed to be the one in control, the puppet master pulling the strings to reveal her true nature. But it was his own nature that was being laid bare, his own soul that was being judged. Every act of her decency felt like a small verdict against him, pushing him closer to a redemption he didn't even know he needed. He was starting to realize this waitress might just be his destiny. The bell above the diner door jingled, and a sound from his other life breezed in high-pitched, affected laughter of his fiancée Victoria. She was with a group of her equally wealthy and vapid friends, slumming it for a quaint lunch experience. Albert's heart sank. He tried to shrink behind the dish pit, but it was too late. The collision of his two worlds was imminent, and he felt a surge of dread. This was a surprise he was completely unprepared for. Victoria, oblivious to his presence, flagged Sharon down with an imperious snap of her fingers. She scanned Sharon's simple clean button uniform with a look of undisguised contempt. "Oh, darling," she said in a voice loud enough for the whole diner to hear, "do they make you wear those rags? It's positively tragic." Her friends tittered, their laughter like chipping ice. Sharon's face flushed with a deep, painful blush, a flicker of hurt in her eyes before she regained her professional composure. From the kitchen, Albert watched, and a white-hot rage, fierce and protective, surged through him. He had seen Victoria be cruel before, but it was always directed at people he considered his peers, part of their world's savage games. But seeing that cruelty aimed at Sharon, a woman whose integrity he had come to deeply admire, was unbearable. He saw Victoria not as his partner, but as a venomous creature, embodying everything that was wrong with the life he had built. He felt utterly humiliated for her. Sharon simply absorbed the insult, her jaw tight. "What can I get for you today?" she asked, her voice steady, betraying none of the sting. Her grace in that moment was monumental. She refused to be diminished, to let their casual cruelty tarnish her. This quiet act of defiance was more powerful than any boardroom takedown Albert had ever orchestrated. It was a heart-aching display of strength that solidified his shifting allegiances. He wasn't on Victoria's side anymore. The incident was a brutal test of Albert's resolve. Every instinct screamed at him to storm out there, to reveal his secret and put Victoria in her place. But doing so would destroy his undercover mission and, more importantly, would likely devastate Sharon, exposing his deception. So he stayed put, his hands clenched so tightly around a scrubbing brush that his knuckles turned white, the anger churning inside him like a trapped animal. The love story he thought he had with Victoria suddenly felt like a hollow lie. He realized with sickening clarity that he was engaged to a woman whose character couldn't hold a candle to the waitress. She was mocking. The contrast between the two women was a stark, undeniable truth. Victoria's beauty was a shallow veneer over a core of arrogance, while Sharon's simple kindness radiated from a place of deep, authentic goodness. The plot twist wasn't just about Sharon anymore, it was about the utter emptiness of his own life, and the people he had chosen to fill it with. The next day, the diner's corrupt manager was in a foul mood. A case of expensive steaks had been misplaced, and he needed a scapegoat. His eyes landed on Al, the silent, hardworking dishwasher. "You," he barked, pointing a greasy finger at Albert. "You were the last one in the cooler. You probably stole them to sell out the back door." The accusation was baseless and absurd, but it was an easy way for the manager to cover his own incompetence. Albert stood there, momentarily shocked into silence. Before Albert could even process the accusation, Sharon stepped forward, placing herself between him and the manager. "That's not true, and you know it," she said, her voice firm and clear, echoing with an authority no one knew she possessed. "Al has been here all morning, working harder than anyone. He didn't take anything." Everyone in the kitchen stopped what they were doing, stunned by her audacity. Defending the lowest-ranking employee was career suicide in this place. The manager's face turned a shade of purple. "Are you calling me a liar, West?" he sneered, looming over her. "You want to lose your job over this nobody?" The threat hung heavy in the air. For Sharon, her job was her lifeline, the only thing keeping her and her family afloat. Albert's heart hammered in his chest. He was a billionaire CEO, yet in that moment, he felt completely powerless as this brave waitress put everything on the line for a man she believed was a down-in-his-luck dishwasher. She didn't back down. "I'm saying you're wrong," she replied, her gaze unwavering. "And I won't stand by and watch you blame an innocent person." This was her integrity in action, not just a passive quality but an active, courageous force. It was a defining moment, a true test of her character that she passed with breathtaking courage. She was willing to have her own financial future decline to protect someone she barely knew. It was the most profound act of loyalty Albert had ever witnessed. He watched, completely humbled, as the woman he came to investigate became his fierce protector. The absurdity of the situation was overwhelming. He could buy and sell this diner 100 times over, ruin this manager with a single phone call. Yet he stood by as Sharon risked it all for his disguised persona. Her selfless defense was a surprise, a heart-aching gift of trust he knew he hadn't earned. This wasn't a love story of romance yet, but it was a story of profound, unconditional human support. The manager, taken aback by her defiance and the attention they were drawing, finally backed off with a grumbled threat. Sharon gave Al a quick, reassuring nod before turning back to her work as if nothing had happened. But something had happened. Something had fundamentally shifted inside Albert Dunn. The last remnants of his suspicion were vaporized, replaced by a feeling of awe and a deep, aching sense of his own unworthiness. He knew, with absolute certainty, what he had to do next. As the adrenaline of the confrontation faded, a profound and quiet truth settled over Albert. He looked at his own hands, raw and chapped from the dishwater, and then at Sharon, who was calmly taking an order as if she hadn't just stared down a dragon for him. In that moment, the entire concept of value in his life was turned upside down. His billions, his skyscrapers, his impurity all felt like cheap, meaningless trinkets compared to the sheer, unshakable quality of her character. He had spent his life chasing numbers on a screen, believing that wealth was the ultimate measure of a man. But Sharon West, a waitress with nothing to her name, had just demonstrated a kind of richness he couldn't even comprehend. Her selflessness was an asset more stable than gold, her integrity a currency more powerful than the dollar. This emotional epiphany hit him with the force of a physical blow, leaving him breathless in the steamy heat of the kitchen. This wasn't just a plot twist, it was a complete rewriting of his personal philosophy. He, the celebrated CEO, was a pauper in the economy of human decency, while she was the queen. He felt deeply humbled and, for the first time, genuinely ashamed of the man he had become. His undercover test had failed to expose her flaws, but had succeeded, with brutal efficiency, in exposing his own. Her kindness was not a weakness to be exploited, but a superpower he could only marvel at. He realized the love story he should have been pursuing wasn't one of status and convenience with Victoria, but one of truth and character. The connection he felt was no longer just intrigue, it was a deep, burgeoning respect that bordered on reverence. Sharon's defense of Al was the most valuable business deal he had ever been a part of, an investment of trust that yielded a return of pure, unadulterated truth. It was a lesson in humanity, delivered in a greasy diner kitchen. That single act of bravery was the key to his redemption, though he didn't fully see it yet. It unlocked a part of his heart that had been sealed away for decades, protected by a fortress of cynicism and wealth. The secret he had been searching for wasn't hers, it was his own. The secret was that he was desperately lonely, starved for the kind of genuine connection Sharon offered so freely, even to a stranger she believed was a simple dishwasher. He knew then that his mission had irrevocably changed. It was no longer about uncovering her angle or proving a cynical theory. It was now about understanding how to be worthy of the kindness she had shown him. The powerful CEO had come to the diner to judge a humble waitress, but in a turn of destiny he never saw coming. He was the one who had been truly and thoroughly evaluated, and he had been found wanting. Later that week, during a quiet moment, Albert was taking out the trash when he overheard Sharon's voice from the alleyway. It was hushed and strained, trembling with an emotion she never showed on the diner floor. She was on the phone, and her words were like daggers to his heart. "What do you mean? The extension was declined." She pleaded softly. "I just need a little more time, please." There was a long, painful pause. "I understand." He heard a quiet sob before she hung up. He quickly hid behind a dumpster, his heart pounding. He knew he shouldn't be listening, but he was frozen in place. He had just heard the sound of her world crumbling. The eviction notice wasn't just a threat, it was a reality. The woman who had offered to pay for his meal without a thought, who had just risked her job for him, was about to lose her home. The sheer, brutal irony of it all was suffocating. This secret pain she carried made her earlier acts of kindness seem even more monumental. The true test of her character, he realized, was not in how she treated others, but in how she carried her own burdens. He watched, holding his breath, as she wiped her eyes, took a single shuddering breath, and squared her shoulders. A moment later, she pushed the door open and walked back into the diner. A warm, professional smile was back on her face as she approached a table of customers, asking them if they were ready to order. No one would ever know the terror she was feeling inside. Albert felt a surge of emotion so powerful it almost brought him to his knees: anger at the injustice, admiration for her strength, and a desperate, overwhelming need to help her. He, the CEO who could solve this problem with the click of a button on his phone, had to stand by and do nothing, trapped in his undercover role. The situation was a cruel and heart-aching form of torture, forcing him to be a passive observer to the suffering of the one person who had shown him true goodness. Her resilience was a thing of terrifying beauty. She didn't crumble, she didn't bring her sorrow to work. She compartmentalized her heartbreak and continued to serve others with grace. This quiet heroism was the most emotional and inspiring thing he had ever witnessed. It was a surprise that a person could endure so much and still have so much light to give to the world. Her brave smile was a masterpiece of human strength, and it completely shattered what was left of his hardened heart. This was the final piece of the puzzle. Her kindness wasn't just an action, it was a philosophy, a way of being that persisted even in the face of utter despair. Any lingering thought he had about a hidden motive was obliterated. Her only secret was the depth of her struggle. And as he watched her refill a customer's coffee, he made a silent, unbreakable vow. He didn't know how yet, but he was going to be the plot twist in her sad story, the unexpected redemption she so richly deserved. In the days that followed, the dynamic between Al and Sharon shifted. The secrets and suspicions that had defined Albert's mission began to dissolve, replaced by something warm and real. They fell into an easy rhythm, working side by side in the chaotic kitchen. They'd share jokes over the dish pit and talk about their dreams during quiet moments in the break room. For the first time, Albert was connecting with someone not as a CEO, but simply as a person, and the feeling was intoxicating. Sharon started confiding in Al, seeing him as a kind and sympathetic ear. She told him about her dream of opening a bakery, describing the kinds of cakes she wanted to bake with a heart-aching passion that made her eyes sparkle. She never mentioned her financial troubles or the eviction, protecting her pride with a quiet strength. Albert listened, captivated, feeling a profound sense of privilege to be invited into her inner world. This was more than an undercover operation, now it was a genuine friendship. He, in turn, found himself opening up in ways he never had before. He talked about feeling trapped in a life that didn't feel like his own, carefully editing out the details of his corporate empire. He spoke of the loneliness that wealth can bring, a sentiment Sharon seemed to understand instinctively. This emotional honesty was a relief, a balm to a soul he didn't even know was wounded. With her, he wasn't the powerful Albert Dunn, he was just a man with problems, a man she saw and accepted. This burgeoning connection was the ultimate surprise of his experiment. He had come looking for a lie and had stumbled upon the most honest relationship of his life. It felt like destiny, a magnetic pull he was powerless to resist. He started looking forward to coming to work, to the simple pleasure of her smile and the easy comfort of her presence. This feeling was entirely new, a gentle warmth that was slowly beginning to feel a lot like the start of a real love story. The line between Albert Dunn, CEO, and Al the dishwasher began to blur. He was happier scrubbing dishes with Sharon than he ever was closing a billion-dollar deal. The test he had designed for her had become a test for him. Could he ever go back to his old life, knowing that this kind of authentic connection existed? The thought of leaving the diner, of leaving her, now filled him with a sense of dread he couldn't shake. His whole world was being recentered around a humble waitress. He knew he was falling for her, and the realization was both terrifying and exhilarating. But his entire friendship was built on a monumental deception. The secret of his identity loomed between them, a ticking time bomb that he knew would eventually explode. How could he ever build a future on a foundation of lies? He was trapped between the man he was pretending to be and the man he was becoming, all because of her. The ticking time bomb finally exploded on a rainy Thursday afternoon. Victoria, his fiancée, had been suspicious of his long absences for weeks. After hiring a private investigator, she had tracked him down to the last place on earth she would have ever expected. She burst through the diner doors, her face a mask of thunderous fury, her designer dress completely out of place amongst the worn linoleum floors. The entire diner fell silent as she scanned the room, her eyes locking onto Al as he wiped down the counter. "There you are," she hissed, her voice dripping with venom. She marched toward him, her heels clicking angrily on the floor. Sharon looked up from a table, a confused expression on her face. "Albert Dunn, what in God's name do you think you're doing in this filthy place, dressed like a peasant?" The name hung in the air, electric and unbelievable. Al froze, the rag falling from his hand. The secret was out, and the fallout was immediate and catastrophic. Sharon stared at him, her mind struggling to connect the dots. Albert Dunn? The powerful CEO from the other night. The man whose meal she had paid for. The man she had befriended, defended, and confided in? It couldn't be. Her eyes darted from his familiar disguised face to the furious, impeccably dressed woman pointing at him. The shock on her face was quickly replaced by a wave of sickening realization. It was all a lie. The friendship, The shared moments, it was all a cruel game. "You've been playing dishwasher?" Victoria shrieked, her voice rising with hysteria. "With her?" She gestured dismissively at Sharon, as if she were a piece of trash. "This is what you've been sneaking around for? To play house with a common waitress?" The public humiliation was brutal, a deliberate act of cruelty designed to hurt both of them. Albert saw the color drain from Sharon's face, her expression crumbling into one of deep, profound betrayal. He could only stand there, paralyzed by the wreckage of his own deception. He opened his mouth to explain, but no words came out. What could he possibly say? It was a test? "I was trying to understand you." Every possible explanation sounded hollow and manipulative in the face of her raw pain. The heart-aching friendship they had built was incinerated in an instant, leaving behind only the toxic ash of his lie. The plot twist had finally been revealed, and it was more devastating than he could have ever imagined. Victoria's furious outburst had exposed him as a fraud. He wasn't the kind friend, he was Albert Dunn, the billionaire CEO who had, for some sick reason, decided to slum it and deceive a woman whose only crime was her kindness. The trust Sharon had given him so freely had been repaid with the ultimate betrayal. He saw the light in her eyes extinguish, replaced by a cold, wounded darkness. His undercover mission had ended in the worst way possible, by destroying the one good thing he had found. The silence that followed Victoria's tirade was deafening. For Sharon, the world had tilted off its axis. Every shared laugh, every moment of vulnerability, every kind word from Al was now replaying in her mind, twisted and tainted by the ugly truth. He wasn't a friend, he was an investigator. He hadn't been listening to her dreams, he had been gathering intelligence. The kindness she had shown him, from paying for his meal to defending him from the manager, now felt like evidence used against her in a secret trial she didn't even know she was in. She felt a wave of hot, searing humiliation wash over her, a feeling far worse than any insult Victoria could ever hurl. She had been made a fool of. The powerful CEO, Albert Dunn, had used her diner, her life, as his personal laboratory to conduct some sort of bizarre social experiment. Her genuine compassion had been treated as a variable in his test. The man she thought she knew was a phantom, a carefully constructed lie designed to mock her and her simple world. Her heart, which had started to open up to the quiet dishwasher, now felt like it had been shattered into a million pieces. The emotional connection she had felt was a lie, a one-sided fantasy. He had watched her struggle, listened to her private hopes, and even knew about her impending eviction, all while hiding behind the mask of a multi-billionaire. The deception was so profound, so cruel, that it felt like a violation of her very soul. How could she have been so blind? With tears welling in her eyes, she untied her apron, the one stained with the grease and sweat of her honest work, and dropped it on the counter. She couldn't breathe in that diner anymore. Every corner of it was now a reminder of her own gullibility. She looked at Albert, her eyes blazing with a mixture of pain and anger. There was nothing he could say that could fix this. The chasm between a CEO and a waitress was not just about money, it was about a fundamental difference in how they saw the world. "I can't believe I trusted you," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. The words were quiet, but they struck him with more force than Victoria's loudest shouts. It was a simple, devastating verdict. The budding love story she had allowed herself to imagine was a cheap novel, and she had been cast as the naive, foolish protagonist. Her destiny, it seemed, was to always be on the losing end of life's cruel games. Without another word, she turned and walked out of the diner, leaving behind her job, her apron, and the man who had so thoroughly broken her heart. She didn't look back. The surprise wasn't that a rich man could be cruel. The surprise was that she had allowed herself to believe, for just a little while, that this one might be different. The betrayal felt final, an unbridgeable gap between his world of secrets and hers of simple, no-shattered trust. Once outside, the city air felt cold and hostile. Sharon walked without direction, the scene in the diner playing over and over in her mind like a horror film. Each step she took was a step away from the life she knew, but she couldn't go back. The diner was no longer a place of refuge, or hope. It was the scene of her greatest humiliation. Quitting was not a choice, but a necessity, a desperate act of self-preservation to reclaim a shred of her dignity. She felt a profound sense of disillusionment. She had always believed in the inherent goodness of people, a belief that had been the cornerstone of her existence. It was that belief that fueled her kindness, her willingness to help a stranger or defend a coworker. But Albert Dunn had taken that belief and shattered it against the hard reality of his wealth and power. He had proven that, in the end, people like him saw people like her as props in their own grand narratives. The idea that their worlds could ever meet now seemed laughably naive. He was a CEO who played games with people's lives for sport, and she was a waitress facing eviction. The brief friendship she had cherished was nothing more than a rich man's whimsical detour, a brief foray into the lives of the little people. The thought made her feel sick to her stomach. The love story she had foolishly imagined was just a cruel plot twist in her already difficult life. She found herself at a bus stop, staring blankly at her own reflection in the plexiglass. The woman looking back at her seemed tired and defeated, the light in her eyes dimmed by betrayal. How could she rebuild from this? She had no job, no prospects, and a looming eviction. The secret hope of her bakery now seemed like a childish fantasy, a dream belonging to a more innocent version of herself, a version that had been irrevocably destroyed by Albert's deception. The most painful part was the memory of their connection. It had felt so real, so emotional and heart-aching. Had it all been an act on his part? Was he capable of faking that level of sincerity? Or perhaps worse, had he felt something real, but ultimately decided it wasn't worth bridging the gap between their two vastly different worlds? Either way, the outcome was the same. She was alone again, her faith in human connection deeply, perhaps permanently damaged. She finally boarded a bus, sinking into a worn plastic seat. As the city blurred past her window, she made a quiet resolve. She would survive this. She had survived everything else life had thrown at her. She would mourn the loss of her job and the death of a beautiful friendship, but she would not let Albert Dunn's cruel test define her. His world and hers were separate, and for her own sanity, she had to accept that they were destined to remain that way forever. Back at the diner, chaos reigned. But Albert Dunn was strangely calm, a man waking from a long, troubled dream. He looked at Victoria, her face still contorted with rage, and he felt nothing but a cold, empty pity. She was the ghost of his past, a symbol of the hollow, status-driven life he no longer wanted. "We're done, Victoria," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "Get out." The surprise on her face was immense, but he felt no satisfaction, only a weary sense of finality. His next act was just as swift. He turned to the manager, who was watching the scene unfold with greedy, opportunistic eyes. "You're fired," Albert stated simply. "Pack your things and be gone in 5 minutes. You'll be hearing from my legal team regarding the missing inventory." The manager's jaw dropped, the color draining from his face as he finally understood who Al the dishwasher really was. This was not an act of revenge, but of simple, necessary cleanup. With the debris of his old life cleared away, Albert was left alone in the now empty diner. He sank onto one of the worn vinyl stools, the silence pressing in on him. He had lost her. He had conducted his undercover test to find a flaw in her character, but the only thing he had succeeded in doing was revealing the gaping, rotten holes in his own. Sharon, with her quiet integrity and unwavering kindness, hadn't been the subject of the test, she had been the teacher. She had shown him the truth. His life was a gilded cage, his relationships were transactions, and his heart was an atrophied muscle. He had been so insulated by his wealth, that he had forgotten what it meant to be a good person. Sharon's simple, heart-aching existence had been a mirror, and he was horrified by the reflection. This entire charade, this painful plot twist, had been a journey of unwilling redemption, and he had been dragged kicking and screaming toward the light. He realized that the love story he craved wasn't about equals in wealth, but equals in character. And by that measure, Sharon West was infinitely richer than he could ever hope to be. He had betrayed her trust in the most profound way possible, and the thought of living in a world without the possibility of her forgiveness was unbearable. He had been humiliated when his cards were declined, but that was nothing compared to the deep, soul-crushing humiliation he felt now. He knew he couldn't fix what he had broken with just an apology. Words were cheap, a currency he had manipulated his entire life. This would require action. It would require a gesture so grand, so sincere, that it could begin to bridge the chasm of his own making. He had to prove that the man she knew as Al, the friend who listened and cared, was more real than the deceptive CEO. His destiny was intertwined with hers, and he would fight to reclaim it. It took him 2 days to find her. She was packing the last of her belongings into cardboard boxes in her small, bare apartment. When she saw Albert Dunn standing in her doorway, her face became a cold, hard mask. "If you're here to apologize, you can save your breath," she said, not looking at him. "There's nothing you can say." He deserved her anger, he knew that. He stood there, accepting the full force of her pain, knowing this was the most important test of his life. "I'm not just here to apologize," he said, his voice quiet and sincere. "Words aren't enough. I know that." He held out a set of keys and a thick folder of documents. "I know you were being evicted, so I bought the building." Sharon stared at him, her eyes flashing with fury. "I don't want your charity, Mr. Dunn. I don't want you to save me." The humiliation of his offer was just another display of his power, another way to control her. "It's not for you," he clarified quickly, his heart pounding. "Well, not the apartment. The entire ground floor is now yours. I had my lawyers set it up in your name, free and clear." He pushed the folder onto a nearby box. "It's for Sharon's suites. It's an investment in the best person I have ever met." The surprise of his statement stopped her cold. He wasn't offering her a handout, he was offering her a dream. Her dream. He finally looked her in the eyes, stripping away all the layers of CEO and dishwasher, leaving only the vulnerable man she had helped him become. "Your kindness changed me, Sharon," he confessed, the emotional truth of the words raw and exposed. "You showed me what a bankrupt man I truly was. This isn't about paying you back, it's about trying to build something good out of the mess I made. It's my redemption." It was a heart-aching, desperate plea from a man who had nothing left to lose. He told her everything, his cynicism, his secret test, and how her integrity had systematically dismantled his entire worldview. He confessed that the friendship they shared as Al and Sharon was the most real thing in his life, and that he had fallen in love with the waitress who saw a man, not a walking wallet. "I know I broke your trust," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "And I know I deserve a second chance." He stood there, completely exposed, his destiny in her hands. "But I am humbly, desperately asking for one. Let me earn your trust back. Not with money, but with time. With honesty. Let me show you that the man you befriended is the man I want to be for the rest of my life." The keys and the deed to her future lay between them, a tangible symbol of his transformation. The ultimate plot twist of their strange love story was now up to her. Could she ever forgive him? And so, the incredible journey of Albert and Sharon comes to a close, leaving us with a powerful and heart-aching reminder. Their story shows us that the greatest transactions in life have nothing to do with money, but everything to do with character, kindness, and the courage to change. We witnessed a powerful CEO, humbled by a simple act of generosity, who had to lose everything he thought was important to find the one thing he truly needed, a genuine human connection. It's a beautiful testament to the idea that redemption is always possible when we're willing to be vulnerable. Their emotional story was a true roller coaster, filled with moments of injustice, surprising friendship, devastating betrayal, and ultimately, hope. We would love to hear what part of their journey impacted you the most. Was it the quiet strength Sharon showed when she defended Al, risking her own job? Or was it the moment Albert humbly asked for a chance to earn back her trust? Let us know in the comments below what scene truly touched your heart. And what did you think of that ending? Did you expect a different outcome, or did you love the way their love story finally began to unfold? We're always curious to know if the desfecho we presented was what you were hoping for. Your thoughts and feelings are what make this community so special, so don't hesitate to share. If this story moved you, please show your support by giving this video a like. It truly helps our channel reach more people who need to hear messages like this. And if you haven't already, what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss our upcoming videos. We have a whole library of older content filled with powerful stories just like this one for you to explore. Thank you for spending your time with us today. Until next time.